Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for the final Aperture PhotoBook Club gathering of 2023. We're really thrilled to see so many people tuning in. And I love that everyone is saying where they're from in the chat. So please keep that up. We have some people in many different places, even among our participants, and we'll get to that in a minute. I just wanted to begin by acknowledging for a moment how much suffering and senseless death is happening in the world. And it feels important to just pause and acknowledge that. And so I'll pause and acknowledge that. I also think that one of the reasons Aperture was founded was to think about how to create insight, community, and understanding through photography. And that seems as urgent a need today as ever. And we are delighted today to be focusing on an amazing new book by Myriam Boulos, What's Ours, and to use that book as a means of creating insight and community and understanding, no matter where we're coming from, no matter what our perspectives might be. So thank you, Miriam and Maya and Michael, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for chiming in. And yes, please keep telling us where you're from. I love that. Aperture is a nonprofit publisher that was founded in 1952. We publish a quarterly magazine. Michael is the editor-in-chief of the quarterly magazine. We also publish probably 12 to 15 books a year. We have an online platform. We will be moving into a new space in late 2024, a hub from which we will carry on a lot of the other activities we do. And education is really at the heart of all of this, and the Aperture PhotoBook Club, which we started 2 years ago, is really at the core of that. So in it, we bring together favorite titles with artists, designers, editors, writers, and others who bring us new insight into the ways in which photo books as a form help us understand parts of the world that we may not otherwise understand, or bring practices with which we might be less familiar into focus. So I would like to, Michael is not only the editor-in-chief of the magazine, but he is also the editor-in-chief of the organization as a whole, overseeing the books, the magazine, and our digital platforms. And I'm going to turn it over to Michael, who, in addition to all of that work, was also the editor of this book. So Michael, your very first photo book club. Welcome. We're glad you're here.
Thank you, Sarah, for having me. And thank you, Maya and Miriam, for being here. As Sarah said, I had the pleasure of working on What's Ours, the first monograph that collects 10 years of work by Myriam Boulos. For those of you who are not familiar with Miriam's work, Miriam is a photographer based in Beirut. She graduated with a master's degree in photography from the Lebanese Academy of Fine Arts, and she has been published internationally in Foam, Vogue, Time, Vanity Fair, and Aperture Magazine, which is how Miriam and I got to know each other and work together. And as Miriam and I were dreaming about what a book of her work might look like, we were talking a lot about who who would be the best designer for the project. And Miriam very smartly introduced me to Maya Moumne, who is the designer of this book and is also the co-founder of the graphic design outlet Studio Safar. Maya works across many different platforms and as a graphic designer, including magazines. She's also involved with the magazine journal Safar, and is also the editor-in-chief of Al Haya magazine, which I know Miriam works on as well. So I share that kind of cross-pollination between books and magazines and the digital space. Even though we live in a digital world, we can still make beautiful print things that can exist in multiple ways. The book is a diaristic portrayal of Miriam's life in Beirut over the last decade. It powerfully melds the personal and the political, looking at the revolution that began in Lebanon in 2019 with protests against government corruption and austerity. And it culminates with the aftermath of the devastating Beirut port explosion in August of 2020. Miriam made a number of pictures in the aftermath of that explosion for Time magazine. And I think that might have been where I first learned of Miriam's work, or I might have been following you on Instagram already. Miriam has a big following on Instagram. But the book I mean, I love Miriam's photography because it's so visceral, it's so powerful, and she portrays her friends and family with just incredible energy and intimacy in states of pleasure and protest. There is such a strong emphasis on the body in the personal realm, but also in public space. And I feel like that is one of the key motifs that runs through the book. The body in both kind of visceral expression, but also you see the way it's vulnerable in the face of state neglect and violence. And Miriam has a great quote that about her approach to photography, where she says, "It's more of a need than a choice. I obsess about things, and I don't know how to deal with these obsessions in any other way but through photography." The book also features a contextual essay by the brilliant writer Mona El-Tahawy. And that is an adaptation of an essay that actually was first published in Aperture magazine, but we can talk more about that later. But just so the audience can get oriented around the book, we've prepared a video with some narration from Miriam that was recorded the other day that I think we could show now, and that will bring us through the pages.
Lebanon, 2013-2023. Images, journal entries, and fragments of conversations in non-chronological order. In October 2019, Lebanon witnessed an unprecedented popular mobilization that brought together people from different sects, social classes, regions, and nationalities, calling for the fall of Lebanon's political elite. The uprising was triggered by systemic corruption, repression, growing inequalities, and signs of an imminent economic collapse. Since then, everything has been emotionally and physically draining, sad and confusing, but also beautiful and awakening. It felt as if we were all coming out of an abusive relationship to finally say, no, this is not normal. Some people have said that my images don't represent us. Lebanon is so layered that I still don't know what us means. My friends and I used to take pictures naked in the streets of Beirut. It was our own way of reclaiming our streets and our bodies, everything that is supposed to be ours. January 28, 2021. I just want to remove all this year's data from my body and start feeling subtle things again, delicacy and magic. May 27, 2021. Today I went to the port. There was a full moon. The first thing I thought was that the view is beautiful.
Wow, that was great. I'm so thank you for narrating that for us. And we wanted to make sure that everyone could hear your words in case we had any connectivity issues, but thankfully we didn't. That was amazing. So maybe we'll begin, Miriam, if you don't mind starting. you received your first camera when you were just 5 years old. And I believe it was fuchsia, and that your brother took it from you and threw it out the window. And you, apocryphally or really, you found this again when you were 16. Would you talk with us a little bit about your experience with photography, which you described as bringing you closer to reality? So we'd love to just hear about your relationship to image making.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for
Thank you.
for this photo book club and for having us. And also, I need to say that it's very funny how my voice in the video that you recorded is very calm compared to my voice right now.
Sounds the same to us. Do you want to explain why you're off camera, just in case anyone's
Yes, of
curious?
course.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Sorry about this.
No, no.
It's just that I prefer having the camera off in case the connection, because the connection is unstable, and in case you have any issue, I prefer being heard at least with my voice. So yeah, but I think you saw in the first part that I smile a lot, and yeah.
It's important to know, and it's true.
Yeah. So to answer your question, actually, I have a lot of different answers to this question, and so I might speak a lot. Let me know if you want to interrupt me at any point. um, so actually, when my brother, I think he's here, and this is not against you. It's on the contrary. It's like, yeah, it was a moment like
There's
when.
actually, there's an amazing group of people, of fans, friends, and strangers. So even
Yeah.
I'm glad to know your brother's here too. That's great.
Yes, exactly. So when he threw my fuchsia camera away from the car window, it felt like reality was escaping from me. You know, it's like when you're washing your hands with a soap and it slides away from you, from your hand. So it was kind of the same feeling. And I think that photography does the exact opposite, like it brings us closer to reality. And a year later, so when I was 6, my parents offered me a big Fisher Price camera for kids. This one was red. And we went on a road trip to Jordan. And apparently, my parents always tell me that I literally, like physically, got closer to everything through this camera. And um, like for me, having a camera feels like, I hope this is going to make sense, but it feels like being an angel, one of the angels in the movie Wings of Desire. Wings of Desire. Like it's a way of getting closer to people and listening to people and kind of staring into their souls without it being creepy. uh,
No one
uh,
accuses angels of being creepy, so I think that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. And during my first years as a photographer, I would experience everything through my camera. It was my way of approaching life. Like photography is a way of getting closer to things, but also it's a way of putting boundaries. And it is a way of sharing an intense moment with people and then being able to spend hours, like hours, days, or weeks alone processing this moment while processing the images. And as a person who can literally spend months alone in my room, like in my own world, and like I have difficulties encountering the real world. Like it takes a lot of energy for me to be around people, and everything from sounds to light to smells overwhelms me very easily. So photography is really the perfect medium for me. And also, in a contradictory way, photography is a sensory seeking tool also, so it is so stimulating visually in the best ways. Um, and yeah, it's just a way of exteriorizing my thoughts and organizing my mind. And some people use words to be heard, and I use images.
Someone just noted in the chat that they're sorry they can't see you speaking. And so I wonder if we might try to have you go on camera, and if it compromises the audio, then we'll tell you immediately to turn it off. But if it's working, I think it is really nice to get to see your face. Is that okay? We'll
Yes,
we'll
of
flag
course.
it if we'll flag it if it uh if it's an
Yeah,
issue. But let's
of
try.
course.
So Michael, you alluded to where you think you first encountered Miriam's work, but I think it could be interesting, you're our I think it could be interesting for people to understand, how do you decide that an artist is, ready, or how you would decide to include them in the magazine, and then how that evolves into the decision to make a book, because these are both very big steps for Aperture.
I'm
Yep.
curious about the answer too.
It's a great question. Well, with the magazine, well, we're a team at the magazine. So my colleagues, Brendan Emser and Varun Nair, and we're all looking at work constantly, and work is coming to us through writers, through people we know in the field, through things like the Aperture Portfolio Prize. So, I think good editors are kind of constantly looking for exciting work. The magazine is thematic, so every issue has a theme. So that usually helps direct our research. Obviously, we're collecting ideas all the time. And I always say that the themes often emerge when we see a kind of, a set of ideas that a number of exciting photographers are pursuing, and then we'll kind of build it out that way. Or it might start with an idea, and then we try to find the work. But I think with Miriam's work, it was either through Time or through Instagram that I was aware of her work from Beirut. And we were working on an issue of the magazine that was published in, I believe, 2021, called Celebrations. And as Sarah mentioned in her introductory remarks, Aperture has this amazing history that goes back to 1952. And Aperture published an issue of the magazine in the early 1970s called Celebrations, which is, like any issue of the magazine, it reflects the era. So it's a sort of slightly, it's an issue of the magazine that has a very 70s vibe. You can interpret that however you wish. But we were thinking about, and in that issue, the magazine was dealing with, they would talk about kind of like the pulse of life and the kind of euphoria of the everyday, I think is some of the language that they used. And so we were thinking about, referencing that issue in a moment where we were coming out of the pandemic and where people weren't able to be together. So looking at how photography either, through the act of photographing brings people together or represents people together. So it ended up being an issue that was focused on ceremonies, festivals, and this sense of euphoria in the everyday. And Miriam's work, because it has this incredible physical expression, just fit perfectly within that theme. And this isn't true for all Aperture books, but a number of Aperture books do begin in the magazine, at least books that I work on, because I work between the magazine and the book program. And, I knew, looking at just the edit for, that issue of the magazine, I don't know, Miriam, what have we published? 8 to 10 pictures? Like, that's what you can do in the confines of a portfolio. But I knew, editing for the magazine, that there were hundreds of pictures to choose from. And like I said, when I introduced the book, that there was probably a decade of work. So, sometimes, we'll publish people in the magazine, but maybe it'll be 10 years later that we publish their book. But with Miriam, we knew that there was actually the work there, that, there was enough for a book. And also that there was a text element to it that we can get to, but that it would work as a book. Not everything can translate from a portfolio to a book. Obviously, a book needs to operate in a much deeper way. But Miriam, there was a real story that Miriam was telling. And we could see the way in which, other institutions were supporting Miriam's work. Miriam had become a Magnum nominee. I think you were in a group show in Amsterdam at the House Marseille. And so it felt like, we knew there was an audience for the work too. And also a sense of urgency in terms of the politics and the issues of representation that Miriam was dealing with, specifically in Beirut.
So maybe, since we're let's anchor it in the book, since that's what we're really here to discuss. Why don't we start? I think Clark and Brianna and Alex have prepared some slides of the opening sequence of plates, and maybe Maya or Miriam or Michael, wow, 3 M's, that just occurred to me, just chime in, sort of narrate us through how and why you settled on these as the opening sequence and how they illustrate the sort of key themes of the book.
Well, one thing I can say just to preface this, and then I want to hear from Miriam and Maya, is just that we talked about having the book kind of hit all the different notes that end up, all the motifs that kind of are threaded throughout the book. So the idea of public space, the idea of protest, like the personal, the body, sexuality, that there would be kind of hints at so like the first sequence is in some ways a kind of trailer for what's to follow. Maya, Miriam, is that how you read what we were doing when we were piecing this together?
Maya, you want to go ahead before I start, before I share
Sure.
my...
Sure. Yeah, I absolutely second that. And because I feel Beirut is a place where the public and the private are so separated, this definitely made sense as an opener for the book. It was very interesting to kind of set the mood there before diving into texts and diary entries and whatnot.
Yeah. I have to say that since it's my first book, I was not sure how we're supposed to do this, so I was just doing it. And Michael, I think that you're the one who told me that it would be good to have a little bit of a hint of all of the themes at the beginning of the book, and to start with some of the strongest images that contain all of the different notions that we explore in the book. And for me, the first image, which is the one of the red seat in a theater, kind of says everything, because from one side you have tenderness, we also have violence. It's literally written "Habak which means I love you to death. And we also have, like, it's a public space with a lot of intimacy in it, and we have a lot of textures that are intense, and it's something that I look for in my work and in images in general. So yeah, I think it was a good way of starting with, and usually my images have a lot of faces in them and are very direct. So I think it was good to start with something that is not too imposing, like when it comes to faces. Yeah.
I should add also, the Q&A is live and open, and I should have said this in the beginning. So if while you're hearing Miriam and Maya talk about this, you have questions, some of them will sort of pepper in as we're going through. Some of them we'll return to later, but by all means, use the Q&A and we'll do our best to get to those questions. So
And I also
yeah,
add
please.
that the structure of the book when it comes to text is kind of a reflection of my approach and how, yeah, the different phases I've been through in photography in my approach. I didn't want to have a lot of text in the first part, because for me, until 2019, until the beginning of the revolution, I didn't used to include text in my work, and it was more like my work was more image based, and like through images, like images are a way of having everything compressed and kind of confused in one element, and words are kind of a way of deconstructing things, and things were very like things were like my work was more emotional than deconstructed. And I wanted to give this feeling in the beginning of the book, like only emotions that are very raw and not text that takes the reader by the hand and brings them through my thought process. And yeah.
Maya, do you was there anything about the sort of, the way in which those images are placed in the opening sequence, that it's there's a sort of a staccato and a destabilization of where they're placed on the page. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of your decisions with that opening sequence, either the images or how they appear?
Perhaps also worth mentioning is the size of the publication for those that don't have it in its physical format is literally based on one of Miriam's diaries that also has a pink hardcover with cloth. So the size of the book is quite intimate. It's not a big photo book. We've literally replicated the size of the diary. And I mean, because I've lived in Beirut and I've lived through, you know, most of these events where the photos took place, and I'm very familiar with Miriam's work, and I've been following her very, very closely for many years. There was definitely like a little bit of distance that I had to put with myself when I was looking at these images and, you know, working with the layout and the placement of the images and what goes big and what goes small and what is positioned at the edge of the page versus in the center. And but yeah, just to repeat again, the idea of the public and the private was one that really touched me very, very dearly because of the city that we grew up in. It's very hard to explain unless you grew up in Beirut. But there's a very big dichotomy between what's public and what's private. And of course, most of the decision making was for Michael and Miriam in terms of the sequence of the images and what goes next to what. But that juxtaposition between what's public space and what's private space and what's being reclaimed as our public space was definitely an important one to kind of set the mood, set the tone of the book.
That's interesting because Maya, I always thought that I'm the only one who feels this. Like I thought it was a personal thing and not a, yeah, yeah. And I always felt like I was always jealous of the people I see walking in Beirut in their robe de chambre, like their almost their pajama, as if they're walking in their own salon. And I felt like the revolution brought these two spaces very like closer, like it's as if suddenly the streets were our home. And yeah. And
you mentioned that the revolution really felt like you mentioned it when you in your opening comments that it felt like escaping an abusive relationship, and you were drawing parallels between sexual violence and state violence and even medical violence, taking a pill and the effects on your body. How for you did that inform the sort of structure and sequence of the book?
For me, everything is very much connected. So I wanted to mix both, and I wanted to show how both coexist with and how everything is intertwined without falling into a binary thing of like just shocking, like private versus public. I wanted to show this in a more like to show this a bit more in depth, like how I feel it.
Complex, I would, by weaving all.
Yes, exactly. And it's actually, as I just said to Maya right now, like I thought it was something personal, this what's the word, like the separation between the public and the private. And before the revolution, I was kind of obsessed with this kind of questions. I always asked if my difficulties in life and with the like with society and this world is due to myself or to society. And I think that it's very interesting that you mention medical violence, because I'm realizing more and more that it's all connected, and medical violence has a big role in all of this. And the fact that, like, in general, the fact that medical research, this is something my sister, who's a scientist, taught me. Medical research is mainly done on white cis men, brings us to be always dismissed as women, dismissed by science, by doctors. And I think it's very much linked to all of this. And it's something that I hint in the book when I talk about the birth control pill.
Yeah.
And,
so, Michael, I'm going to let you, since you worked so intimately with Maya and Miriam, I'm going to let you sort of take the lead when we dive into things. So handing it over to you?
Well, Maya, we were thinking it would be really interesting for the audience to hear. We had so many conversations about typography, and as you mentioned at the start, the book is bilingual. And Miriam, maybe you can talk a little bit too about why, it was key for you to make sure that this book was in English and Arabic. But we had a lot of conversations about the typefaces that would be used in the book, in particular in the Arabic text, and what the different kind of connotations were with different styles of calligraphy. So maybe we can hear a little bit about how you were thinking about that approach as a designer. Looks like Maya might have frozen.
Yeah. Well, Miriam, you can talk a little bit about it, and then, well, maybe if Maya, I think she's also going to, she has a PowerPoint. Oh, maybe if you're off camera, Maya, how's it going?
I'm off camera because it's a bit choppy.
That's fine.
I'm in the same city as Miriam, and I have the same Wi-Fi problem, so I'm just going to turn off my camera.
No problem at all.
Or I can turn it on, and if it gets choppy, you can let me know again, and I'll turn it back on.
You want to? I think you have some images to share with us, though, about this. So you can go off camera and show those images, and I think everybody would love to see them.
The first image that we were taking a look at, or the big red image with the seats, the theater, that was quite like a poignant image for me to open, to place at the beginning of the book, because this theater is a very, very old theater in Beirut that has been blocked off and closed off for us for, I mean, as far back as I can remember. I've never visited this theater. It's been really closed off to us. And not until the revolution in Beirut happened did protesters break through this theater. And we saw this with our own eyes for the first time, versus, our entire lives we've seen this theater, which was a very important theater in downtown Beirut, in publications and old movies and whatnot. And that this image is at the very beginning of the book was also a very important one. And this is just like stemming off of our conversation of the private and the public.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the image. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about like some design decisions that we took in the publication with regards to Arabic and English, and the direction in which we open publications in Arabic and publications in English. And I'm starting with a magazine that both Miriam and I co-founded, called Al Hayya, which is a feminist women's Arab magazine that's published entirely in English and in Arabic. And what we're looking at right now is the English cover of the magazine. So this is the spine of the cover, right? You open it from, in English, you read from left to right. But in Arabic, you flip the magazine the other way. So you flip the entire publication, and then you open it in the exact opposite direction. And because of that, our magazine has 2 front covers and no back cover. And so depending on the side that you open it with, you'll be reading that language. And this is how we design most bilingual publications in Arabic and in English, with 2 front covers. So in this case, the Arabic cover, the spine is on the right side. And these would be, this would be, if you open the magazine flat, these would be both sides. So there are 2 front covers. And I also want to mention that the need for publishing this content in its physical format comes from many different places. One of the most prominent ones for me personally is that publishing this content, whether it's in English or in Arabic, is occupying physical space with these words. And because most of the print industry has been dominated by men in the Arab region, that we print this content and take the time to translate it and publish it in Arabic means that we're carving out a space for this for this lingo. Whereas we really haven't had words in Arabic coined, feminist words or inclusive terminologies, so on and so forth. This is the cover of a book by a very prominent feminist in the Arab region. She died a few years ago, called Nawal al-Saadawi. She was the director of public health for Egypt and an OBGYN, and then became quite a prominent activist feminist writer. And this book is called Women and Sex. It's completely published in Arabic, and it discusses a lot of the female genital mutilation practice that happens mostly in Egypt and Sudan, but the Arab region for sure. And as shortly after this book was released into the market back in the 70s, it was removed from the market. It cost her her position as Egypt's director of public health, and she lived the rest of her life in exile. And I usually use this book in a lot of the presentations that I give with regards to the work that we do with Al-Hayya, because time and time again, it's really important for us to stress why we publish this in its physical format and not in a digital format. And this is a short video that I'm going to include with an interview with Raja Salim, who's the translator that Miriam and I both work with Al-Hayya, where she talks about the inclusivity of the Arabic language. Just let me know if you can't hear the audio, but we should be good to go.
There is no deficiency in Arabic itself, but it is in our mind, how we practice it, what we choose to say. Like I choose to communicate with men. This is my problem. I mean, I don't, but I mean, whoever choose to, you know. The language itself, yes, it has the potential. It has every single pronouns for everybody. How we use it, this is our choice. So Arabic is not inclusive, not because the Arabic language is not inclusive, because the practitioners, people who practice, who dominate the media, the politics, the publications are men, mainly, are ignorant. They don't use Arabic in like its full potential. اللغة العربية لغة غنية مثل أي لغة تانية، فيها تخاطب المؤنث وفيها تخاطب الأشخاص اللي هن هوياتهم متنوعة وأحرار الجنس، وفيها تكون لطيفة، وفيها تكون عم تحاور النساء والرجال وكل العالم. أنا برأيي إنه it's time لحتى نحن to own our language, it's our identity, to have our agency.
And of course, all of this is being shown as an example to, I mean, the title of the book, which is What's Ours. I find this quite pertinent. And for the Arabic font that we used on the cover of the book, I commissioned an Arabic calligrapher in Beirut to write Miriam's name in a Naskhi font, which is a kind of Arabic script that's, I'll explain shortly what's Naskhi font. But I also wanted the cover to be done by a calligrapher as opposed to a font, because calligraphy, is an ancient craft that's disappearing with time, and it's very, very heavily dominated by men. There are very, very few women calligraphers in the Arab region. And I thought it was quite interesting that I had an old man write the title for a book that included a lot of personal moments from Miriam's career. And this is what it looks like on the cover. And that he probably has no idea what he wrote and where that was going, and aside which picture. I love that. It's like my little secret.
I was wondering if he knew what he was doing it for.
He sure did not. Surely did not. And also worth mentioning that most of the skilled and trained Arabic calligraphers in the region usually do a lot of conservative calligraphy. So they provide calligraphy for a lot of religious books, diplomacy, official documents, so on and so forth. Certainly nothing to do with this. And this is a spread from one of the books where you can see the relationship between the English and the Arabic. And I also just want to go back here to mention that we made it a conscious choice that the book doesn't have two covers, so it doesn't open from the Arabic side. It's got a back cover and a front cover. And that was a very conscious choice that we took to give more prominence to the English part of the book, and to also acknowledge that most probably the person who's going to be carrying this book and reading this book, I mean, it's not meant for it to be for one Arabic only reader, and that this text exists in Arabic is really very much so a statement that this content, these words, these memories, these experiences exist in the Arabic language, whereas for almost our entire lives, we did not grow up reading Arabic texts that shared very personal, intimate moments like this.
And Maya, do you think it's fair to say that on the front cover, it's almost like it's a declaration for somebody who might not, in other words, if for someone who picks up the book and has an expectation for, in an English language context, this is sort of, we didn't want anyone to miss that by having someone pick up the book the wrong way and think that the Arabic was somehow, only, you didn't want to only be conscious of that if you were accustomed to picking up the book and looking at it from right to left. Is that fair?
Absolutely, absolutely. Although all of the content inside is translated, everything is included in both languages. And as far as I'm concerned, in my experience with publications and publication designs, and as a reader from Beirut, this is the first book ever to exist with Arabic writing and Arabic text that features a photo of two women kissing on the cover, and this is everything for me.
I really want to return to like that risk that you and Miriam in particular are taking with this, but we'll keep talking and then we'll get to that. But I think that's really important.
With absolute pleasure. This is just an example from one of the spreads inside, so you have an idea of the relationship between the English and the Arabic. And as you can tell, the text is not, the fonts chosen are not by any means decorative or embellished or loud or very present. They're quite toned down. And I just want to start with this quote here by Miriam. My friends and I used to take pictures naked in the streets of Beirut, Boulos writes, and it was our way of reclaiming what's ours. And again, this is just going back to the book by Nawal Saadawi and the video where Raja Salim speaks on the inclusivity of the Arabic language and reclaiming our agency by using Arabic the way that we want to use Arabic. And it was very important for me that the choice in Arabic font is one that's based on the Arabic Nasikh script, which is a round script of Islamic calligraphy. Nasikh is one of the first scripts of Islamic calligraphy to develop, commonly used in writing, administrative documents, and for transcribing books, including the Quran, because of its easy legibility. And so this is the Arabic font that we used, and it's called Covert Arabic, which is designed by Christian Serkis, and it pays homage to Nasikh forms. And that's it.
Fascinating.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maya. Actually, since we're talking so much about the typography, maybe we should talk a little bit about what Miriam is writing. And Miriam, maybe we can hear from you about, when you choose to add text, because the way that you think of the image in relationship to text, because I remember when we were sequencing and there were certain things. It's funny what you said at the top of this program about it being your first book and not sure how to begin, because Miriam had a very specific sequence so that I think we mostly adhered to at the end of the day. But maybe you could talk just a little bit about the role of writing in your practice as a photographer, and when you decide, to have text alongside an image or not.
Yeah, I have a lot of things to say about this, and also about what Maya was saying and Sarah's question, because for me, this book is also about reclaiming my own words, because I always had a lot of difficulties writing and presenting my thoughts and speaking up through words. And I realized during this same phase that when I speak in my diary and when I don't feel any pressure to fit in anything or in anyone's gaze or expectations, and when I speak like I write from my guts, I am like, I have zero issues with words. And it was a way of reclaiming my words. And also the Arabic was very important for me because because in Arabic there is the spoken Arabic and the written Arabic, and usually in books what we find is the written Arabic, which is much more complicated, at least for me. And I worked on the translation with a friend who really wanted me to reclaim my words and to translate the book in a spoken Arabic and in words that I think that I'm incapable to find, but I actually already have in me. So yeah, so from one side, this is important for me. And from another side, the place of words in general, and how I use them with images. Actually, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, I didn't use, like, my work was only image based before the revolution, and I always wrote in my diary. Like, I have so many diaries. I have more diaries than hard disks, and I have a lot of hard disks. So I realized that, like, I felt the need to share my diary and to share my own thoughts. And I think that it initially came with the cyberbullying at the beginning of the revolution, and I'm not happy with the fact that this was the reason why I started to feel the need to include text, but I needed to kind of explain my position and show, like, and my kind, as if I was justifying my position and my own thoughts and everything that comes behind the images, because images can be kind of loud, and which is amazing, but also kind of superficial. So for me, it was important to deconstruct the images and to take the viewers by the hand, to say, like, to let them get lost in an image, and then to tell them exactly what I wanted them to hear and to read in the images. And also, I think that, like, sometimes, for example, after the August 4 explosion, the words started taking much more space in my work, because I felt like I needed to listen to the people, and I started questioning the place of the image in documenting our region, and especially oppression in our region. And this brings us back to me trying to justify my position. And again, it brings us back to the English and to what Maya was saying about this book ending in the hands of people who are not from the region. I think that adding words was a way of humanizing us, which is something that is very sad. That, like, it's very sad that we find ourselves in a position where we need to humanize ourselves when we document the region to the world. But it was a way of defying, like, the traditional ways of documenting our region, which is usually based on reducing us to numbers and statistics and literally dehumanizing us. And one last thing about the place of text in images, because I think that what we're living, like, currently is very representative of the place of words in documentary. Like, in the current genocide that is happening in Palestine, we have an overdose of images, and these images are being shown by mainstream Western medias, and they're being reappropriated by mainstream Western medias, but they are kind of being turned against Palestinians, and, like, these medias are taking away all the agency of the photographers in Palestine by reframing their images with different wording. Like, and once they change the words and the framing, like, the image loses all of its power. And I think that in this kind of cases, words are so important and necessary. Yeah, like, to
one
name
of the
things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and one of
sorry.
the things that you do, especially in the section you talk about where you have more text after the port explosion, is that you actually include the voices of the people you're photographing.
Yes.
And it's interesting, like, as not sure that happens so much in the earlier part of the book. So maybe you can talk about when you decide to kind of just give space to the people you're photographing, to their voices too.
Yeah, of course. This is very much linked also to the cyberbullying. In this sense, the cyberbullying was very useful because it made me realize that by documenting my own experience of the revolution, I was inevitably documenting the story of so many other people who were living a similar experience. And I realized that I couldn't just use people's faces and bodies to express what I needed to express. And I became very interested in the moment, like the moment of a picture and this encounter, and how in one image, like one image is the encounter of the whole universe that I carry with me behind the camera, and the whole world that the people in the, like the person in the picture carries with them. And yeah, I just became very aware of my responsibility as a photographer. And yeah. So
I love that idea of like the universe that you're carrying, but also this when we talked about what size the book should be, you produced this well, we did this exercise that I think you titled the PDF. I asked you to tell me about books that you just like to hold as a way of thinking about what this object should be like. And I do think like a great book, or maybe any kind of great work of art in some way, has this sense of compression, and a great story has a sense of compression. And I love that your work, the pictures have this kind of intense energy, and like I feel like these intense stories, everything is compressed into this very intimate space. So I don't know if we have visuals of this PDF.
We do. We don't have a ton of time, but I do think, Miriam, if you're willing to, we can just go through quickly the sort of inspiration document of books you like to hold. I think people would really love that. And but I want to return to this question of risk and the cyberbullying, because I think that's important for people. What is so threatening about this work? So let's start. I mean, yeah. Let's let you narrate books you like to hold, and then we'll return to that before we wrap up.
Yeah, Michael, what you said about like something small and everything being compressed in it, it's exactly how I feel about images and how I wanted to feel about this book. And I think that like I felt like you were talking about myself, because I feel like I'm very small, and there's so much in me. So yeah. And the first, I think that the main reference was this diary, which was a notebook that was to my grandmother, and that my mother gave me after she passed away. And it's pink, which is my favorite color, and it's crazy because, and it's actually exactly the same size as the book, almost. And it's crazy because when we were choosing, when Maya and Michael and I were choosing I don't know how you call this, like the 2 pages inside of the book. And paper. I told Maya and Michael, I trust you, so choose whatever you want. And they happened to, like, they chose exactly the same end paper as the diary, which is crazy.
Wait, Maya, had you held the diary?
Yeah.
That's true. Just a coincidence?
I have not seen it either.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
But Sarah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can talk about risk even just by leaning into the image. In other words, the diary doesn't have an image on the cover.
Yeah.
But you chose, and someone in the comments also noted, the bravery of there's nothing neutral about this. It may be diminutive in its scale, and it may evoke something that's very personal, but it is a very brave public statement, and it does carry real risk. And so I would love it if each of you would speak to that. Now Miriam's a little frozen. So Miriam, as much as we've loved seeing your face, we'll let Maya start while you go off camera.
I mean, I think Miriam and I already are at a big risk very heavily with that magazine, published a lot of
actually, would you go off? I think
there are quite a few Arab cities that we don't enter.
Sorry, would you repeat that? Because you broke up, but I want to hear every word.
You got it. I was saying that I think Miriam and I already are at a big risk with the work that we do with Al Haya. Our names are very heavily associated to that magazine. And there are lots, I mean, the content that we publish in the magazine is, you know, not really compromising. There's a lot of articles about governments, sexual assault, female genital mutilation, politics. I mean, the list goes on and on. And there are lots of Arab cities that the magazine does not enter because it's high risk, not just for us, but for the contributors whose names are published in that magazine already. But and I remember Miriam and I having a conversation actually about the publication, about what's ours, coming to Beirut, and there's a, you know, I mean, it was you know, it was a conversation worth having for sure. And I mean, yeah, it's, I mean, what can I say? It's a big risk, but it's like a risk that, you know, personally, I'm very, very, very happy to take, no matter the consequences.
I agree. And I think that my answer to this question is linked to what I was saying about my responsibility as a photographer. Like this whole phase that I document in this book really taught me to deconstruct photography's conventional approach, which is, let's face it, which is colonial and patriarchal, very, very deeply. And I think that it is with this phase that my approach became very collaborative. And actually this image, like the cover, is very representative of this whole approach, because at first I did not share the image. I was like, let's not do anything with it. And then 2 years later, Vanity Fair in France contacted me for their cover, and they asked for a picture of a kiss. So I went back to my archive and saw this image, and I was like, oh, okay. And so I contacted the people in the image, and it was a very long conversation. During 2 weeks, we had very, very, very long conversations on, like, if we, like, the risk we were taking by publishing the image. And yeah, for me, if the people in the images have zero, like 1% of doubt, I'm like, I don't want to put them in this position. And but at the end, we decided together to take this risk. And yeah, and actually this is the only reason why the book is not in Lebanon, because it would seriously put them in danger, which is something that like, yeah, I don't want.
Wow. You know, it's two. I could go on for hours with you all, but I think before we wrap up, there were several great questions that came in, some of which we got to, some of which we didn't. But I think maybe the last question that I'd like to ask you, Miriam, is, you know, what did it feel like seeing or holding this book for the first time? It's a really big moment to publish your first book, and I think that is something that I think everyone would love to hear. How did that feel for you?
That's a big question. It's an emotional question. I don't even know how to answer, because it's like holding a baby, like my baby. And at the same time, it's not only like an emotional baby, because it's also a way of fighting and resisting. And I think that it reminds me that our work and documentary is a way of resisting in so many ways, and speaking up. And I think that it's also a way, like, especially in this moment where we feel so powerless, it's a reminder that we actually have some power, and that this kind, like, for example, I'm sure our book, will last much more than our politicians. And so yeah, it's a nice feeling. It's an emotional feeling.
Well, it definitely will last. And so will this conversation, thankfully. We've recorded it. And like all of our Aperture Photo Book Clubs, those recordings will be available. So to Miriam, first and foremost, thank you so much for for your art, for your bravery, for your candor. Maya, your work in bringing that vision of Miriam, her diary, into everyone's hands, and the thoughtfulness of the scripts and everything, it was just amazing. Michael, it is always a pleasure to work with you, and I'm glad you were joining us here today. I'd also like to thank, because it is our last photo book club of the year, to Clark, Leland, and Candle Productions, who make everything look so great and seamless. To my colleagues, Brianna Redding and Alex Schlechter, for their tireless dedication and leadership behind the scenes. You don't see them, but they are intimately involved with all this, especially Brianna. So thank you. And to Photo Focus for making this possible. Part of why we're able to sort of elevate the experience is thanks to your generous support. So it's a very New York City moment. There's no sun in my eyes. It's just sun reflecting on the apartment building across
Night
the
is so
street.
beautiful.
But thank you all so much, and thank you all the guests for joining. It was really exciting to see where everyone was tuning in from, truly all over the world. So thank you all for being a part of this, and we'll see you in 2024.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.